Good afternoon and welcome to this meeting of the South Wales Fire and Rescue Authority Standards Committee. I will say, as we begin the meeting of the Standards Committee, that it is beholden upon us as a committee and in the way that we interact with each other to be fully cognizant of the Nolan principles, and it is for us to set standards of good behaviour within the concept of the organisation generally. To move then to apologies for absence. Are there any apologies for absence?
Yes, Mr. D. Fussell, Councillor A. Roberts, A. Geraint Thomas.
Thank you. If there are no others, we will then proceed to item 2 and declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest, please? Okay, thank you. I will say that this is the first meeting of this committee that I have chaired, and therefore I will, in the interest of transparency, say that I am a member of the Vale of Glamorgan Standards Committee. I also chair the Standards Committee for Blaenau Gwent, and I'm an independent member on Powys Teaching Health Board. I'm mentioning all of those as a matter of transparency. Thank you. Moving then to Chairperson's announcements. I'm cognizant of one thing which I should mention here, and that is last Friday there was the first meeting of the National Standards Committee Forum for Wales, which was attended by at least 28 separate bodies, including all the principal councils and the fire and rescue authorities. It is intended, I haven't seen formal minutes yet because the meeting only took place on Friday, but it is intended that that forum will be a forum for good practice within standards committees generally throughout Wales. In essence, it is a voluntary members association, and it will meet twice a year. We were fortunate to have Michelle Morris, the Ombudsman, attend part of the meeting, who explained in the last year that there had been some 300 complaints to the Ombudsman's office. Approximately 100 of those came from principal councils and 200 approximately from town and community councils. So there is a considerable workload going through the Ombudsman's office. Most of the complaints in respect of principal councils and towns and community councils refers to lack of respect and behaviours, which is a matter of concern for the Ombudsman. There is shortly to be a 12-week consultation on taking forward some of the recommendations of the Penn report. And Simon, you referred to the Penn report, I think, at the last meeting of the Standards Committee. Is that correct?
I have to say I don't recall that, but
okay.
I'll defer to you.
That's fine. Well, just to clarify, the Penn report was a committee, or Richard Penn, comprised a report which was intended to look at the standards through which standards committees operated, and he actually prepared a substantive report. Sarah, can you just help me? Has this actually been previously reported to this organisation?
I don't believe so, not to my memory.
Okay, so can I make then a request that when next the Standard Committee meets, we do have an update on the Penn report, its origins, the report itself, and the recommendations that are being taken forward from it.
There was, sorry, Ronnie, there was, not last year, maybe 2 years ago, we did have a report about the Penn report, but not about what's happened since it was published. So,
Okay,
yeah, we'll do that.
for clarification then, I think, in terms of what's been taken forward since it was published, there is shortly to be a 12-week consultation. But I think it would be good to have an update at the next meeting of the Standards Committee. Thank you. Okay, moving then to the minutes of the Standards Committee held on the 3rd of October. Simon, I wasn't present, but you were. Would you be very kind and take us through these, please?
Yeah, sure. I'll just do it very briefly, and if anybody's got any observations or comments, then do feel free to chip in and stop me. So you'll remember that we had some very thorough training from Mr. Daycock from the Mid and West Wales Fire and Rescue Authority about the Members' Code of Conduct and work of standards committees and the role of the adjudication panel for Wales, which I certainly found very informative. So that was a good start to that meeting. And then in terms of matters arising, so that's on page 6 of the PDF. The first thing that we looked at was, I think this is arisen from a previous meeting. There was a point about breakdown of key performance indicators into separate areas, and we had an update from the monitoring officer about that, who had met with the Ombudsman and confirmed that individual complaints were not broken down into separate areas, but the Ombudsman had agreed to attend the next Standards Committee meeting in January to address individual queries. So obviously beyond that, I assume isn't on the agenda for today, but it might be that we'll hear from the Ombudsman at a future meeting. But it was nice to see that was taken forward by the monitoring officer. And then the other matter which arose was members claiming for pre-meeting preparation time, which was agreed, and we were able to claim for 2 hours of preparation, which is good. Then we looked at a review of the terms of reference of the Standards Committee. So we looked at that in some detail, and in particular we had a discussion about the references in the terms to the Bribery Act, which is quite a complex piece of legislation, and there was a suggestion that might be something which we could receive some training on in the future, as well as other areas such as anti-fraud, corruption and whistleblowing. Then we considered the schedule of observation visits, which some members had made to meetings of the authority, and there was a schedule of observation visits rather, which was adopted. And then we had various reports for information. So we had the Public Service Ombudsman casebook, and an update about the All Wales Standards Forum, which Ronnie's just mentioned. The outcome of the report of the consultation of the Welsh Government's Standards of Conduct statutory guidance, which obviously we noted, and that was the end of that meeting. So I don't know whether anybody would like to comment or highlight anything that came out of that meeting, but I think that's all I have to say about it.
Thank you. Shall we just take those matters arising? Yes, please.
Yeah, first of all, I'd move acceptance, and I must say that presentation with Dave Daycock was absolutely brilliant.
I do agree with that. I wasn't at the meeting, as you know, but I looked at it online and I thought the training on YouTube was absolutely excellent. Okay, thank you. Moving then to matters arising, and page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4 and page 5. Okay, thank you. We then move to item 5 of the consent agenda, and the appointment of Vice Chair of the Standards Committee. Sarah, are you going to take us through this?
Yes, absolutely, Chair. So it became evident at last meeting that it would be useful to have a vice chair appointed to the committee. So we propose that in today's meeting, if we could take any interest from independent members who would be willing to accept the vice chair position should the chair be unavailable for future meetings. And then if we do have any independent members that are interested, if we could then conduct an appropriate vote. So opening the floor to you, Chair.
Thank you. So I'd just like to ask if there are any independent members here present who'd like to put themselves forward as Vice Chair for the Standards Committee.
I'm very happy to do so, Chair.
I'll move that, Chairman.
Thank you. That was a very swift conclusion. Thank you, Simon. Well done. Moving then to item 6 of the substantive agenda, and the issue of the annual report for the Standards Committee. And what we have in front of us in this substantial pack of papers is the draft report. Sarah, would you like to take us through this, please?
Yes, please. Thank you, Chair. Looking at the Draft Standards Committee annual report, the Local Government and Election Wales Act 2021, as a matter of good corporate governance, the service has embedded measures to enable the Standards Committee to produce an annual report for the Fire and Rescue Authority. And the initial report went in May 2022. And that started the process of introducing an annual report of the work of the Standards Committee to provide the authority with an update of its activities during each financial year. If I could please draw members' attention to the draft report in Appendix 1 on page 17. What you'll see is that we very much followed the format of last year's report, with a distinction of section 5, where we identify the 2 separate meetings that the Standards Committee now has on an annual basis. Now, the final content of the report will be drawn from the draft minutes and circulated to members for approval prior to submission for inclusion in the last Fire Authority meeting of the municipal year, which will be held on Monday the 27th of March. So members will receive the draft towards the end of February. If I could pause for a moment there and ask members for their feedback and comments on the content and format of the report, if there's anything that you'd like to see in there that's not, or anything that you would like expanded.
So this is your opportunity to make comment or observation on anything that you would like to see included, or indeed anything that you strongly wish might be taken out. Can I just look around the room and see if there is any observation or comment?
The only thing I would suggest, Chair, is maybe for the membership is to note the start and end of people's terms, members' terms, rather than just the joined date. So we're just so we're aware of when terms are running to.
Good point, Dr. Kirby.
That's really helpful. Thank you. Any other comments? No comment. No comment. Simon, are you content?
Yeah, no, I thought it was a very good report, very thorough. So yeah, very happy with it.
I do like the fact that it's personalised in terms of having individual photographs. I think that's something to be commended. So, upon that basis, we note the contents of the draft report and are content to approve it.
Thank you, Chair and members.
We then move to item 7 of the substantive agenda and the Public Service Ombudsman for Wales Code of Conduct case. Sarah, would you like to take us through this, please?
Yes, absolutely. I do apologise that mine is predominantly the voice you're going to be hearing today as we go through all of these reports. So the Standards Committee, as part of its terms of reference, has responsibility to oversee matters relating to the Public Service Ombudsman for Wales. The Standards Committee review the work of the Ombudsman as a matter of good governance, and there have been no findings of a breach of the code against any members of South Wales Fire and Rescue Authority within the Ombudsman's website. Now, members last considered the content extracted from the Our Findings section of the Public Serviceman Ombudsman for Wales website concerning complaints against the Code of Conduct for the period of March 2021 to August 2022. Now, appendices 1 to 5 of this report, members will see their extracts from the Public Serviceman Ombudsman's website regarding decisions made relating to the Code of Conduct. So now referring to these appendices from page 29 of the pack, there were no outcomes to report for the Code of Conduct against integrity. There was one outcome to report for the Code of Conduct for promotion of equality and respect, which can be seen on page 31 of this pack. And the Ombudsman in this case determined that as the member's role was ultimately decided by the electorate, it wasn't in the public interest to take any further action in respect of this matter. And they found that under section 69 4B of the Local Government Act, no action needed to be taken in respect of the matters investigated on those two points. So moving on now then to the Code of Conduct for disclosure of registration of interests. Again, at Appendix 3, there were no outcomes there. But there was one outcome to report for the Code of Conduct of duty to uphold the law, which can be seen on page 35 of the pack. In this one, it was referred back from the Ombudsman, to apologise, to the Standards Committee involved, and the Standards Committee concluded that the member had breached paragraph 61A of the Code of Conduct, and the Standards Committee decided that the member should be suspended for 2 months and were required to attend Code of Conduct training within 6 months. And then looking at Appendix 5, again, there were no outcomes to report for the Code of Conduct against selflessness and stewardship. So the recommendation is that members note the content extracted from our findings section of the Public Services Ombudsman for Wales website concerning complaints against the Code of Conduct for the period of the 1st of August 2022 to the 29th of December 2022. I'll pause there if members want to make any comment.
Thank you, Sarah. Any comments or observations?
I just had a question about particularly about this case about duty to uphold the law. Just coming in on the radio, just in the car there, a number of drug driving convictions are currently in question because of problems at the labs, and I wonder what the situation would be in such a case here if somebody was to have their conviction overturned because of that. What would be their rights of redress, so to speak?
I don't know, but I can find out, and I'll be able to report that back to the committee at the next meeting.
It'd be interesting to know. Obviously, if something came along sufficiently far down the line, what are you outside of your period for appealing? If you then find that 2 years down the line the lab was inadequate.
Would you like to say anything more about the information you picked up?
It was just on the news on the radio saying that I can't remember whether it was one specific lab has been found to have the chain of possession of the samples I think they had not been observed. So the drug driving convictions that had taken place because of evidence from those labs are potential to be overturned.
So the chain of evidence was defective.
I believe that's the case, yes.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. That's a helpful observation, and Sarah, perhaps we can investigate that and come back.
Yes.
Any other comments or observations? Some of this does make quite sad reading, actually. So upon that basis, we have noted that report for information. And Sarah, if I'm correct, we now move to item 8 of the substantive agenda. Is that correct?
Yes, we do.
And that brings us to observations. Observation visits by independent members of the Standards Committee to committees of the Fire and Rescue Authority here. And I think there is an intention that these are reported verbally on the day. So Sarah, did you want to say anything about this by way of introduction?
Yes, please. Thank you, Chair. So at the last meeting, we shared the dates of our committee meetings with members. And then in December, we shared a feedback form for independent members to use when they have the opportunity to observe meetings. And that feedback form can be seen on Appendix 1, page 41 of your packs. So, and I do appreciate that independent members haven't had terribly much of an opportunity to provide feedback, particularly using the form that we've produced. However, we were fortunate enough for Ronnie to observe the local pension board on Monday, the 23rd of January. And I'd like to thank Ronnie for the prompt return of his feedback form to us. There are definitely some areas for improvement and clarification. And Ronnie, I just wondered if you wanted to share some of your observations with us today.
Yes, of course, very happy to. This was a meeting that took place on the 23rd of January at 1000 hours. Initially, it had a slightly sticky start because we weren't sure if we were actually quorate for the purpose of the meeting. But nonetheless, that was resolved and the meeting got underway and got underway successfully. My observations are that it was a purposeful meeting. It followed the agenda. Everyone on the committee was respectful of each other, and I thought the meeting was focused and had a reasonable pace. Some of the subjects that were under discussion were reasonably technically complex, and I cannot say that I understood everything that was discussed, but then my presence was just to observe that the standards by which the committee ran were correct and proper, and I'm happy to say that they were. So in summary, I thought it to be a friendly and purposeful meeting which made good progress through the agenda. I would also make the observation that this observation sheet is not set in stone. It does probably require a degree of modification, and I would have some comments to make on the form as a consequence of the first time that I've used it, and presumably others will make comments as they begin to use the form as well. But I think to go to a meeting to observe it, it's a jolly good idea to have a structured process for reporting what one has seen and heard, and therefore I think the concept of the form and the use of the form is a good one. Any observations or comments in relation to that? No? Can I ask Simon and you, Mark, is it your intention to observe meetings in due course?
It is, yes, yeah.
Thank you, Mark. And you, Simon?
It's a little difficult given where I live to come over, but if there are any online, maybe I could observe one of those.
Well, for clarification, Simon, the one that I attended by Microsoft Teams.
Oh, okay.
So I think that's entirely possible with
Yes,
these.
that's great. Okay, I'll try and find a suitable one.
So can I just encourage you both then to make use of the form and to observe a meeting if you can, and then to report back in due course. Thank you. Sarah, do we need to simply need to note this, is that correct?
Yes, if I may just finish,
Sure.
Chair, as well. As independent members do manage to observe the meetings and provide feedback, both on the meetings and on the form, we can amend the form accordingly, obviously. But what we will do with the observations that you do make, we will collate them into a report, but to come back both to the Standards Committee and also for us to report to the Fire Authority, potentially through our annual report, which actually that could be something that I could add into this year's annual report, isn't it?
Yes.
That intention. So if you're all happy with that, I can do that. Then we'll be able to, as a service and an authority, to continue to improve our performance. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Sorry, can I just ask, Chair, at the meeting that you attended, did the chair of that meeting mention that you were there observing at all?
The chair didn't. If you forgive me, I'll just refer to the part of the forum I was with. Okay. I was welcomed by Alison Reid at agenda item 6. So once the preliminaries of the meeting had taken place, I was formally welcomed to the meeting.
Okay.
And I do think it's important. The point that you make is important, but I do think it's important that members of committees know that we are present. It's just an observation of known principles. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Does that satisfy the point?
It does, thank you. That's it.
Thank you. Okay. On that basis,
Do you want to get any comments on the checklist, Chairman?
please.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the checklist on Appendix 1, and the one that always intrigues me, or always get mentioned, is on 42. Could you view what has been said?
Yes.
Now, I've just mentioned earlier on, there's
Yes.
2 of us in the room, sometimes have difficulty in hearing what's going on. And I've been in many rooms as a surveyor, picked this up with acoustics. As it happens, in this room is quite good.
Yes.
But probably if there's a lot of people in the room and the chair is at that end, the rest of us at the back might not hear everything going on because the sound gets absorbed by the soft fabrics. But I think it's also important when the reverberation time is a long time with the acoustics that maybe we should consider carrying out any alterations to a room if it's necessary. Say, for example, an acoustic ceiling or quite a lot of soft furnishings. So people who have a slight hearing problem can hear everything loud and clear. There's the same with IT. Now I can hear Simon, every word he is saying. I've been in situations where, like say, the local authority, we have meetings, or some are on Zoom, and some of the equipment being used, well, dare I say it, some of it is rubbish. And you cannot hear it. But as I said, I can hear Simon, every word he is saying. But we need to check it, make sure.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Sarah, can I ask you to consider that
Yes.
in terms of what alterations might need to be made?
Can I make a suggestion
Please do.
on a cost value that it might be more cost effective to look at hearing speakers, microphone, not microphones, headphones, something of the like might be a more reasonable cost than having to change and make building alterations.
Yeah, I think this is a very important point, and I'm in your hands here. So I suppose with your forbearance, Sarah, I'm just seeking advice, if that's okay. If I were going into an NHS unit, which I sometimes do, as a lay representative, I would automatically expect there to be a hearing loop in that unit and for it to be available and for use. Would a hearing loop provide?
Yeah, they're excellent because and they're movable.
Yes.
The more modern hearing loops are able to move from room to room, which then don't afford a cost of having to make alterations to one room, and then you might have an automatic change to a different room. You can use these hearing loops as some fantastic pieces of kit that are movable from room to room.
So perhaps that might be where the
Can I just ask my colleague something through you, Chairman, of course.
Of course.
When you say about these, do you say headphones or something?
Yeah, so if
Will
I
they
was
be provided by the authority?
Yeah, I have headphones
Yeah.
provided by the authority. If
You-
if I'm working at home and I call in, then I have headphones on, and I find it far easier because obviously it compresses the sound. In somewhere like this, obviously I've got my hearing aids, but if I didn't have my hearing aids, or if there was a hearing loop, I could change it to. It just sits in the middle of the table, and you can tie into that. Or some of them have them in the ceilings, but you can move them around. They're not something that is stuck in one room, and therefore it's far more cost effective.
Thank you. So the
Can
point.
I just mention something like that, which might be useful? If the individual members have got their own equipment, that's fine. But many years ago, I suffered a nasty ear infection. I had to go to the hospital in Cardiff, and I was told that do not use phones, headphones, etc., unless they're own personal, because you could pick up an infection of somebody else. I went virtually completely deaf, because I'm deaf in the one ear, and that was rather frightening. So I just don't want to sort of compound the problems, but I think we've got to take that into account.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think your observation is well made, and thank you for your observations too. And we'll see what can be done. Is that okay?
Absolutely, yes, thank you.
That then moves us to, unless there are any other points, to item 9 of the substantive agenda and the standard conference for Wales 2023 to be presented verbally on the day.
Yes, so apologies members, at present I don't have any information on when the Standards Conference for Wales is being held in 2023. But as soon as we do get information, we will then share that with committee members via member support. And I'll also make sure that I place this on the forward work programme for the next municipal year, so it doesn't get lost.
Okay, thank you. So we then move to item 10 of the substantive agenda and the adjudication panel for Wales, which I refer to in shorthand as APW. Easier. Okay, so can I ask you, Sarah, to report on the APW annual report, please?
Certainly. So the APW have 2 statutory functions in relation to breaches of the Code of Conduct, and they are to form case or interim case tribunals to consider references from the PSOW following the investigation of allegations that a member has failed to comply with their authority's Code of Conduct, and also to consider appeals from members against the decisions of local authority standards committees that they've breached the Code of Conduct. Now, on an annual basis, the APW produce a report which members can see at page 53 of this pack, which is Appendix 1 of this report. And that report covers who and what the APW are, their performance and progress, case summaries that they look at, their business priorities and their expenditure. And their report always looks at the progress over the last 5-year period to provide context. So on pages 60 to 65 of your pack, you can see the performance of the APW, their performance indicators there. And we can see that over the last 5 years, the number of references and appeals that they've received have gone from 3 to 10 over the last 5 years. And then the number of references and appeals decided by year from 2017 to 22 has increased. You can see that on page 61 from 2 to 7 over that period. We can see all the rest of their indicators there, but of particular interest, I think, at page 62 is the graph where we see the breaches by type. And we can see that there are 3 headline runners on the breaches by type, those being a failure to show respect or equality or bullying. So there's been 14 of those over the last 5 years. Bringing the office or the authority into disrepute, there's been 13 cases there, and failure to disclose interest or withdraw when appropriate, which we can see there's been 12. Over the last reporting period, there have been 4 case tribunals resulting from reference from the Ombudsman. Those can be seen in the case summaries at section 3 from page 64 onwards. In the first case, the tribunal unanimously concluded that the councillor was to be suspended from acting as a member for their relevant authority in respect of 2 breaches of the code, and then for a period of 5 months in respect of 2 other breaches of the code, and for those to run concurrently. In the second case, the tribunal unanimously concluded that the councillor was to be disqualified from acting as a member of the relevant authority for a period of 12 months. The third case that's identified, the tribunal unanimously concluded the councillor was to be suspended for a period of 12 months. And it was further recommended that the councillor undertook further training in the Code of Conduct and Equality and Diversity, and also provide a full written apology to their colleague in respect of the breaches of the code towards them. And then the fourth case, the tribunal unanimously concluded that the councillor was to be suspended from acting as a member for a relevant authority for a period of 9 months. So those 4 cases were clearly taken very seriously. And then during the same reporting period, 2 appeal tribunals took place, arising from a decision made by a local government standards committee. In the first case, the appeal tribunal found that the actions of the councillor did constitute a course of harassment, and it was a breach of the code, and they endorsed the 2-month suspension sanction imposed by the standards committee. And then in the second case, the appeal tribunal found that the sanction should be reviewed and recommended that a 2-month suspension should be considered by the standards committee. On referral back to that particular standards committee, it declined to change the sanction, and the suspension of 3 months came into effect. So we can see there that where there were two appeals, that the APW supported the initial findings of the standards committees. I'd like to pause there if members have got any comments to make.
Thank you. Any comments or observations? Simon, Mark, anything from you?
Not from me, no.
I mean, yeah, just two very brief points. I mean, I always think it's interesting how few cases there are before this tribunal, but I suppose that's a positive thing, that they're not getting lots of appeals or having serious cases referred to them. And also just looking at the breakdown of the cases on page 62, I think the majority of them were equality and bullying, which I think from memory chimes with the statistics that of the cases that go to the complaints that go to the Ombudsman as well. So I think that's quite an interesting trend there. So those are my observations.
Thank you. I was also interested to see that there's been one appointment of a layperson to the APW in this year, which I think is a new trend, because my recollection is that President Herschel had previously cross-ticketing between tribunals for lay members, so I thought that was interesting. And there is, as it were, an upward trend in much of this, which is worrying in terms of lack of respect and behaviours, really, which is symptomatic of what the Ombudsman was reporting as well. If there are no other comments or observations, I think we note the report. Thank you. And we then move to item 11 of the substantive agenda, and the Independent Remuneration Panel for Wales, which is slightly easier to say, actually, and their annual report for 23 23/24 is a draft one. Sarah, do you want to take us through this?
Yes, please, thank you. Longer standing members of the committee will note that the report is in quite a different format to that has been presented previously from the RPRW. So the RPRW decided to focus on the changes that it was making as a result of the proposals. So they therefore decided that the majority of the content set out in previous reports would be removed and placed onto the panel's website. Now, the area of specific interest for South Wales Fire and Rescue Authority is on page 95 of your packs, which looks at the payment to National Parks Authorities and Fire and Rescue Authorities, which is determination number 5. Now, payments for elected members will increase as a result of the uplift proposed for elected members of principal councils, and therefore there will also be an uplift of 4.76% in the basic salary element. The remuneration for chairs will remain linked to the Band 3 senior salary for principal councils, and there will be a small increase in the role element to their pay. Deputy chairs, committee chairs and other senior roles will remain linked to Band 5, and therefore their role element of pay will remain frozen, and the increase in basic salary will apply. All other determinations for 22-23 will still stand and should be applied to 23-24, including those covering contributions towards costs of care and personal assistance, reimbursement of travel and subsistence costs, compensation of financial loss, co-opted members, and restrictions on receiving double remuneration where a member holds more than one post. So it's recommended that members note the extract of the IRPW's draft annual report, which is attached in Appendix 1, that provides details of payments to members of the Welsh Fire and Rescue Authorities.
If there are no comments or observations on that, we note the report as requested. And we then move to item 12 of the substantive agenda, the Public Service Ombudsman for Wales Annual Report and Accounts. I will say just before we begin this, that Simon, you referred to the fact that we were expecting Michelle Morris to be present at this meeting, and unfortunately due to an administrative mistake, that did not prove possible. But I gather it is the intention that Michelle Morris will be at a future meeting of the Standards Committee. So I hope that just clarifies that slight point, which was uncertain previously.
Yes, we may not have the auspicious Michelle Morris, but a member of her team, hopefully. So,
Okay.
Yes, so that's where we are. Thank you.
Correct, I stand corrected then, Michelle Morris, or a member of her team. Thank you, Sarah, please go on.
It's okay, right, so, right, looking at this paper now, so there are 3 main roles that for the Ombudsman, which are to investigate complaints about public service providers in Wales, to consider complaints about breaches of the Code of Conduct by elected members, and also driving systemic improvement in public services. So the number of Code of Conduct complaints in 21-22 was 294, a decrease of 5% compared to the previous year. And complaints about members of national parks, there were 5, and for the fire authorities, there were no complaints, so they remain low. Of those complaints, the top 3 related to the promotion of equality and respect, and that was 51 compared to 55% the previous year. 11% related to a failure to disclose or register interests, which is 14, which was 14% the previous year, and 9% related to integrity, and that was actually a reduction from 12 the previous year. All of the code of conduct complaints received were assessed against the two-stage test, and that considers whether a complaint is supported by direct evidence, that is suggestive that a breach has taken place, and is it in the public interest to investigate the matter. Now, although the Ombudsman still refer a very small proportion of all code of conduct complaints received, it was more than half of those that they decided to investigate. And this was also twice as many as the previous year, and the highest number of referrals that they have made since 2012-2013. The Ombudsman are concerned about this increase, and it suggests that the ethical standards of a small number of councillors have the potential to undermine public confidence and the reputation of government democracy. And it's recommended that members note the content of the report. Basically, I provided a summary in the white paper, and then in the appendix you have the full annual report and the accounts.
Thank you. So we're asked to note this report. From my perspective, I will say that I was particularly pleased to see the clarity with which this is set out. Also interested to see a comment from Nick Bennett, who has now departed, that 25% of the Welsh population are on NHS waiting lists. I know that isn't directly relevant to our scope of function here, but I thought it was an interesting statistic. Any comments from you, Simon, or from you, Mark?
There was just one question I wasn't quite sure about the meaning of, which is on page 121. So where there's the summary of cases and complaints, the very bottom point says 7%. We uphold only 7% of the review requests we received. I'm not sure what is a review request in that context. Do you know? The rest of it sort of seems fairly clear to me, but
I don't know directly, but we can find out for you and provide that feedback back.
okay, thank you.
Any other comments? Yes.
Right, Colin Chair, it's nice to see that there wasn't any complaints from the fire authority.
Yes.
Does that mean we're all good, ladies and gentlemen?
Well,
But what was interesting, I found or noticed that there was quite a lot of complaints from town and community councillors from the community. But at the same time, the only thing I could say that, say for example, you're in the Llantrisant community, there's 4 wards. That's represented by 14 community councillors, but then there's only 4 county borough councillors.
Yes.
So there's a lot more community and town councillors.
Indeed.
So probably it's about right.
Thank you. Would you want to comment, Sean?
No, I'm agreeing with you wholeheartedly. I think I put more people in a mix, you're going to get more arguments.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so I think that's probably one of the reasons why we're seeing town and town councillors arguing more. There's more of them. There's more independent views out there that need to be shared.
Thank you. Can I just say, Sarah, that I was particularly pleased to see the easy read version of this. And I think I've been through it very carefully. And I look at a lot of easy read documents, and I think this is one of the best that I've seen. So if I may, I'm going to make a more general point and say that maybe, I don't know to what extent, reports of the fire authority generally are produced in easy read, but maybe that's something that could be looked at as an exemplar for making reports more accessible and readable to all sections of the community. I hope that's permitted within our terms of reference.
Absolutely. All suggestions for improvement are very well.
Thank you. If there are no other comments, we move to item 13 of the substantive agenda, Public Service Ombudsman for Wales, updated guidance on code of conduct.
Thank you, Chair. So, now unfortunately, I do apologise, members, this was meant to be in the initial pack that you received. However, because of the size of the document, it's probably grateful, particularly for those of us that had printed off versions, that it wasn't in there. So, with this report, the updated guidance has been provided for us from the PSOW, and this is for members to note the content of the appendix. Now, I don't know, Chair, because it wasn't included in the main papers, did you want us to put this on the forward work programme for the next meeting so that it can be reviewed in its entirety?
Well, from my perspective, that might seem sensible. Are others content with that?
For that, yes.
Yes.
Okay,
Thank you, Chair.
thank you. So we don't need to reach a view on that at the moment.
No, we'll defer that now to the next meeting or put it on the forward work programme.
Okay. And on that point, we move to item 14 and indeed the forward work programme.
Thank you, Chair. So just to confirm, we will be moving that last agenda item onto next year's forward work or the next meeting's forward work programme. Every other item of work on the forward work programme has been completed for this municipal year.
Thank you. And we obviously track that very carefully, and hopefully we'll continue to do so because that's the way that we show progress. Thank you. Then moving to item 15 of the agenda, and to consider any items of business that the chairperson deems urgent. I have no items. I've not been notified of any items, but I will not deny anyone the opportunity to raise any items of A or B if they wish. Simon? Mark?
No.
Sharon?
No.
And you?
You're letting that go on, Chair?
Thank you. Okay, on that basis, the meeting is finished and we are concluded. And I thank you very much for your attendance here this evening. And for some of you, as it were, travelling through difficult, congested traffic to get here, which is appreciated. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.